You have, of course, covered almost all the questions I would have asked you. But, I mean, you mentioned...
Because I asked myself these questions separately.
But in terms of stability of this region, which historically has not been a stable region, and you can argue that you look at Macedonia today, or North Macedonia, or the Fyrom, or whatever one wants to call it, you can argue that there's still tension there. You look at relations between Belgrade and Pristina, etc., etc. The EU, the prospect of EU accession, obviously has been a very, very useful carrot to all the reforms that you in Serbia and others have been carrying out. What would happen if that carrot somehow not necessarily taken away, but put on a shelf? I mean, you mentioned Mr. Macron not being that keen on enlargement at the moment. I mean, you made a very persuasive argument that you are doing things for Serbia anyway, but nonetheless, there must presumably be an impact politically and economically if the carrot is removed.
I think it probably, it certainly depends on the country and the government. I know that I am and my government is deeply and honestly committed to these reforms. This is something that we have to do because of the quality of life of the citizens in Serbia. And it is high time that they actually do live better, not just in terms of jobs, which is the most important probably issue, the level of income, but also that they actually feel that public administration is there to serve them, that they are the focus of the public administration, that they can rely on the efficient judiciary, that they can rely on the predictable judiciary, that we can, that we have good enough systems in place and institutions to fight organized crime and corruption and so on and so forth. So, I think, I think the challenge would be that I think that the whole accession process in terms of chapters and opening and closing of the chapters is a good toolkit for a country on how to implement reforms and what are the key reforms to be implemented. So without that, it would be perhaps a little bit more difficult. It would take more time. And again, I think that's why, for the citizens, it's important that they see that the chapters are being opened, that the chapters are being closed, because then they see that progress. But in terms of substance, I think, and I hope, not many things will change.
Is 2025 a realistic target?
And I have to be honest, I think in general in the Balkans, including Serbia, we work better under pressure. So, so that pressure is a really motivating factor for us to actually implement the reforms.
Well, obvious pressure is Kosovo, Pristina. I mean, you have this idea being launched recently of land swaps. And yet, Paddy Ashton, Carl Bildt, people who have been in the region supposedly as, let's say, neutral administrators, think this will be disastrous.
That is surprising to me, I have to say, because they did not think so 10 years ago. So I don't know how.
But they argue that this will be opening a Pandora's box, and there'll be, people would then move from one area to another.
Listen, the Pandora's box, if anything, was open exactly 10 years ago, when you've actually went into, the so-called Kosovo, or a few people in Kosovo proclaiming, independence, a unilateral declaration of independence without any single democratic principle. I mean, there wasn't even a referendum. No one asked people living in that territory, would you like to be independent?
Mind you, we in Britain don't have good experience with referendum.
No, I can see it. After your referendum, all other referendums in the world became just consultative, not obligatory. So someone said, okay, and at the time of peace. So it wasn't a wartime. At the time of peace, proclaimed independence, and a number of countries rushed to recognize that unilateral declaration of independence. which wasn't even according to the borders of that former Yugoslavia. This was Serbia.
Yeah, yeah.
This was the Republic of Serbia. Like, you know, if you said, okay, you know, there was a Croatia, there was Slovenia, there was Bosnia and Herzegovina, there was Macedonia, at least these were the republics within the former federation. This was Serbia. So the Pandora's box was opened. And what we are trying to do now is close Pandora's box. So you can't say, well, you know, by doing this you will open Pandora's box. No, we will close Pandora's box.
Which would mean recognition of...
Because, you know,
kind of
Catalonia, Spain is the biggest example that Pandora's box was open at that time. You know, you have other examples,
but if you,
Abkhazia, South Ossetia, you know, many, many other examples.
But you mentioned Catalonia. I mean, Brussels famously distanced itself from any involvement in trying to resolve that particular dispute. And I guess they're doing the same with Kosovo and Serbia, or not?
I think that
could they be more helpful?
I think Belgrade-Pristina dialogue is you know, however difficult and challenging it is, and it is extremely difficult and extremely challenging. And I have to say, and I'm trying to be as objective as possible. I have to say that, you know, I'm proud with how Serbia is behaving in that dialogue, and with the flexibility and stability and tolerance, and, you know, with the constant provocations from Pristina. We are committed to peace and stability, and we are committed to trying to resolve this issue in a, you know, to trying to find a compromise. But then, you know, you can't say that, you know, everyone has to admit it's a good example of two parties actually coming together to sit down and talk about their, you know, what is their joint future. And also, it's unbelievable to me that a third party would come in and say, whatever you two agree, it's not acceptable to us. I really
that third party being Albania,
whoever,
or being Russia,
no, but
being
whoever that,
the EU, or who?
Whoever that third party might be. If there is, and I think there's a long way away from that potentially even happening. But again, hypothetically, thinking that, okay, there is some kind of an agreement between Belgrade and Pristina, why would any third party say, well, we think it's not good?
Yeah. I mean, there has to be an agreement before you can join the EU, basically, because I can't see how the EU would want to repeat of Cyprus.
Yes, but, you know, again, that's a very, very gray area, because, you know, not all countries of the EU actually recognized Kosovo. 5 important countries did not. So in those terms, the EU Commission is neutral in terms of the status of Kosovo and Metohija. So again, it's a big question. So, you know, I think the normalization is important for us and for all the citizens living in Serbia. And I would like to see the resolution. I would like to see that we do not pass on the frozen conflict to generations behind us. And I think it has been extremely brave, and I'm not sure to what extent actually the EU or other world leaders, I would say, can actually comprehend how brave the decision by the President Vučić was to say, I will try to resolve this issue. I will not, if possible, I will not pass this on to generations that follow. And I think it's extremely cowardly and extremely irresponsible to say, well, I think status quo is okay, as some of the opposition leaders are saying, or most of the opposition leaders are saying. We think status quo is okay. In the frozen conflict, let someone else, let my kid or my grandkid resolve that, because I can't. I think it's extremely irresponsible. You know, would you do that to your kid? I just, in just individual terms, I just don't think, that you would want to resolve the biggest issues. That our job is to try and resolve the biggest issue and leave stability to the generations that will come.
You mentioned EU values, sharing the same values. There is now a feeling in parts of the EU that certain member states, namely Poland and Hungary in particular, are not upholding those values. Do you agree?
I can't say that. I mean, I really can't speak on behalf of the EU. That would really be presumptuous. And apart from that,
well, what do you think the values are that should be emphasized and maintained?
The values are those that I just said. You know, there's this. You know, the belief in institutions, the rule of law, the efficiency and transparency, public administration, but also all other public institutions. You know, I think, you know, fair market. I think these are, you know, obviously, you know, also the human rights, media freedoms. All of these are, I think, the basic EU values that we all should share. Whether or not this is shared by all and in equal terms by all EU members, I really would not dare to say, because we have our own issues that we are trying to resolve. So, you know, I'm again Prime Minister of Serbia.
I know what you get to.
It's more than enough on my plate, so, you know, I would not go there.
Let me invite questions from the audience. Please just put a hand up. Don't be shy. This is a unique opportunity. And they are all incredibly shy. Gentleman there. Mike Nelson.
Do we have microphones?
Yes, a microphone is rushing over.
I just think this means that I speak too much and far too
No,
often.
it means they're too shy, they're too deferential.
Too often.
Mike Nelson, Cloudflare. I work in the internet industry. You've done a lot on e-government, and I'm curious how you see e-government, better government online, and the use of social media by governments as a way that could advance the cause of regional stability and economic integration.
Yes, that's one of my key priorities, I have to say. You know, I often say, you know, our response to efficiency, transparency, and fight against corruption is e-government. That is my, you know, that is almost my universal response to these things. Because I think e-government really just is a tool that increases transparency of the government and makes life much easier across the board to all the citizens, those that that will use electronic services, as well as those that will not use electronic services and feel more comfortable doing things the old-fashioned way, because these queues, you know, will be, you know, there will be fewer people there because more people will do stuff from their home or from their office. So I place a lot of emphasis. I really do believe this is going to be a game changer for the administration, the quality of life of people in Serbia. We've had to start from scratch. Almost nothing has been done. So the basic registries weren't there. We are just building the basic registries now. We have just on the we are just starting now on the 8th of October the public discussion on one of the most important ones, that citizen registry. You know, we've been introducing e-payments, we're now introducing electronic archiving and so on and so forth. But I'll give you an example of fight against corruption. Our construction permitting process was lengthy procedure, very difficult procedure. It was one of the most corrupt processes in Serbia, because you had to pass through all of these little steps. You had to go, you know, to take your papers down to the, you know, to public enterprises, to local governments, to the ministries, to provincial government, whatnot. And so this is one of the first processes that we made fully electronic. With a huge support from USA, and I see Ambassador Scott there, but also huge support from German embassy and German people through GIZ. That has become the most efficient, the most transparent process, and we actually completely erased corruption there because it's fully electronic. you never ever see anyone. So you can't, no one can tell you, well, for 50 or 100 euros, your paper will be here instead of here. So that is what I believe in. And we are just, yesterday, I'm chairing the government's council for e-government, where all the government institutions actually participate in. And it's just fantastic actually to see what we are doing. And I think that the whole public administration will look very, very differently come 2020. And the other one was
Social media.
social media.
I was thinking tweets, and I was thinking about
Yes, I tweet. I try to tweet. You know, I don't try to tweet as much as possible one way. I try to respond to citizens' tweets. It's a difficult tool because you get many nasty messages. You know, it takes a lot of time and effort. Actually, a lot of psychological power. I think he's tweeting one way, but it's, I think, but I'm trying to tweet two ways. So you know, but I still believe it's a good way to communicate to citizens, and I do try to also always make my my team in the cabinet to actually respond to people and try and resolve problems even on an ad hoc basis, because I think we are here to serve the citizens. But we are actually, and I can announce now, perhaps, you know, my communications advisor will shoot me afterwards, but, you know, that we will have, we've been working very hard for the past several months on the new website of the Serbian government. The one that we have is really outdated. It really serves no purpose. It is only one way, and even that works terribly. So hopefully in the next few weeks we will launch a brand new website of the Serbian government, which will be completely two-way, and I will be actually able to get daily reports on the citizens' questions and requests to different ministries, and the feedback of these ministries.
So, I mean, Estonia presumably is a model that you could...
It is a model, but I always keep saying...
And you could surpass it.
It will take time, for sure, but Estonia is a different model. Because Estonia is the model of the country which actually completely started from scratch. So when they left the USSR, their data basically left in the USSR,
yeah.
You know, or the Russian Federation. So they started from scratch, you know, which is easier. Yeah. I have to say, you know, we have all of this in the paper format, and you have to actually transfer all of that from paper format into the electronic format, and then link these. Someone has done something, someone didn't. You know, someone created some databases, others created some other databases. They're not in the same format. It's very difficult to connect them. So it really is much difficult.
But you worry about cybersecurity, about hacking, and obviously, you know, I mean, the British government has just accused Russia, GRU, of being behind so many different incidents, attacks recently, and Russia, you know, obviously allegedly had a role in Montenegro, Ukraine, etc. This presumably is a concern.
Definitely, it is one of the biggest challenges. It's one of our biggest priorities, which is why we've established the government data center, and we are now also, for the security of data, we're also building, next year, we're starting to build a backup and disaster recovery center, just to make all the data, you know, make sure that they're double safe. In terms of hacking, we will work, and I've spoke to the EU Commissioner for Digitalization on actually joining the whole European-wide effort on cybersecurity. And it's also good that, you know, we've established the Office for IT and e-Government, which is now our cybersecurity center. So I'm hoping that I'm sure that we will be able, in that respect, we will be able to join the whole EU effort even before we do not become members of the EU.
And also, so Mike mentioned social media, and I mean false accounts, Facebook, etc. This must also be something which can be used against any particular government or political party.
For
And
sure,
those for it.
it's something that's happening, I think, already all over the world. It's something that we always have to be extra careful of. But I also have to say there again to advocate for the e-government. When people say, "But are you afraid that it's less secure because it's in an electronic format?" I would actually, my experience is quite different. I'm feeling much less secure when it's somewhere, when the citizens' data are somewhere in the paper format in some local government office with some civil servant that, locked up in some old drawer, that if he or she wants to pull out the data, copy it and give it to someone, you would never know. But actually, if you have e-government, the central office for IT and e-government, or whoever institutionally is responsible for this, can track all of this. So they can track who actually accessed citizens' data, what for, and where they used or misused, which you can't do if this is in the paper format. So I think there is a lot to say about e-government there as well.
Another question, please. Yes, gentleman here.
Thank you for the opportunity. Slavko Caric, Erste Bank. I will continue in English so that nobody has to put earphones on. Erste Bank is one of the largest lenders in terms of real estate in Belgrade and in Serbia, with close to €500 million of equity and capital put into, and we do recognize and commend what the Serbian government has done in terms of issuing building permits. And I, by instance, know the fact that in the past 18 months, 1 million square meters of building permits have been issued in Belgrade alone. So that's really a very, very big achievement. Now, there are three issues that banking sector and a couple of other organizations that I represent, like AmCham and Foreign Investor Council, think that digitalization can actually bring forward in terms of cutting corruption, cutting red tape, and making sure that both banking sector and economy is performing much better. Bankruptcy procedures, which are very lengthy and unpredictable. On top of that, cadastre, which needs to be digitalized and put into a different format because it's a completely black box. And basically tax reform, continuation in speeding up of the tax reform and the reform of the tax office, because there again predictability and equal treatment is not something we see all the time. Thank you very much.
You've basically outlined key areas that we focus on in terms of the World Bank doing business improvement. Cadastre is certainly one of the reforms that we are pushing very hard right now, we are finally doing the whole in terms of registries and e-government, the address registry. It was unbelievable to me that when we started all of this effort, for example, that more than 50% of the citizens of Serbia do not have the right addresses, adequate addresses. They either live in streets with no name, which were not recently built, but in the past 20 years, or in the house without any number, especially in the villages in Serbia. You basically have a village and that's it. And the post office actually knows people by family, and then they, but it's crazy when you look at it and you think, okay, if I want to have an e-government or if I want to check the cadastre, where do I start? There was nowhere to start. So that's why with the cadastre we went into the whole reform, and which we need to finalize by the end of this year. Also, we've introduced this. The notaries are now communicating directly to cadastre. I was supposed to promote this reform already in September. We are still resolving some of the issues. It's working in practice, but we're resolving some of the issues. So I think we will, beginning of next year, see a very different cadastre in Serbia finally. Tax administration, I just had a meeting with IMF yesterday. It's one of the key focuses of our new project with IMF. We are separating core from non-core activities in order to make tax administration more efficient and also to increase the capacity of tax administration. Extremely important, so we are working on that. And the bankruptcy law we just changed. I have to admit we did not go all the way in that reform. There is still a lot outstanding in that we will have to deal with in 2019.
Let me take, because I think you have to go quite soon. Let me take one more question if there's one. Gentleman there.
Thank you very much. Michal Hrušik, Embassy of Slovakia. Now I'll give you a bit more difficult question, and I'm curious whether you'll answer that. So, although it's quite hard to imagine a situation that tomorrow the government in Kosovo will tell you, okay, we'll give you the northern part of Kosovo, you'll get it, and that's the end of the story. But we demand full recognition for that. So that means that you've got to abandon your current policy, resign on the principles, and probably send the ambassador of Serbia to Pristina. Would you be able to accept that, or is it still a red line for you, and the only thing you can possibly give to the government in Kosovo, for instance, like the seat in the UN or some other kind of a deal? Thank you.
Yes, well, obviously I cannot answer that question. It would be really, I mean, that is one of the topics that is, that is really just under the Belgrade-Pristina dialogue. Whatever I say now can be used against us or for us. I don't know. I have to say,
it was a brave attempt.
It was a brave attempt, yes. I have to say, from where I sit, I do not see that Serbia can recognize Kosovo in that shape or form. I think of myself as liberal, but it's a very, very emotional issue, and it's very difficult to even talk about that. I wouldn't go there.
Well, I think on a note which was both emotional and realistic, we need to give a big round of applause to the Prime Minister. Thank you very, very much.